Hey everybody, welcome back to Pastor Dad's podcast. This is Gabriel here with you with Josh and Bo. We're so excited to bring you episode 3. First off, we just want to start off by saying thank you so much for the support. Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. You guys are all over the place. You podcast listeners, the Pastor Dad's podcast listeners are the few and the proud, and we're so glad you're with us. And we are actually closing in on 300 likes on Facebook. So while you guys liking our Facebook page, we would like you to interact with us there. If you listen to a podcast and you have a comment or a question about anything we talked about, we'd love for you to engage with us there. Or if it's something that you don't want everyone in the world to see, you could always message us on that page as well. And we also like to have your ideas for topics, right, guys?
Yes. Yes.
We want to hear from you. So if you want to comment, shoot us a post or a message on Facebook. Or if you know us personally, which most of you probably do, you can send us a text and we'll tackle just about anything. We're not scared.
Yes.
As you've noticed in the first 2 episodes, we've talked about some somewhat controversial things. So all that said,
Right.
Episode today, Bo, what is our episode today?
I believe it's on parenting as pastors, being pastor dads.
How about that? It only took us 3 episodes to actually tackle the title of our podcast.
Yeah.
Who wants to kick us off? Because, man, I'm scared of this subject already. I'm going with Bo.
So
Yeah.
parenting is the act of raising up children, or grandchildren or great grandchildren, or however, whatever situation you might find yourself in. So we're going to talk about what that might look like for us as pastors, as a group of friends. We can discuss our own techniques and maybe share and see what happens with our kids when they grow up.
It's all an experiment.
Yes,
It's
it
the
is.
scary part.
Yeah. Who left us in charge of this anyway?
I don't know.
Yeah. I remember thinking that when Gabby was born, or for those who don't know, our first child, I remember leaving the hospital like, why do they trust me with this kid? Like, why are they letting us leave with this baby? We don't know what we're doing. And obviously it's worked out. She's doing okay. But yeah, like Josh said, who left us in charge?
They don't know what they're doing.
But there's got to be some kind of natural inclination for parenting, because you just figure it out and then you end up doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, something that helps is I probably could speak for all three of our marriages on this, but there's just something about having a good, steady, responsible spouse.
Responsible is the key word there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just something about it, from in my case, Julie does a lot, if not most of the hard duties as being a parent. I try to do better, and I'm trying to get better at that, but she definitely does a lot of that. And that's something that definitely helps us. The issues though that arise are usually, if they're controversial with each other or whatever, the issue is always that there was a lack of communication. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a big one.
yeah.
What do you think, Bo?
I definitely couldn't do it without my significant other. It would be a nightmare trying to raise kids on my own. I don't know how anybody does the single parent thing.
Right.
I sure can't imagine a pastor being a single parent.
Oh man.
For sure.
So
I do have a question. Well, Gabe, what about you first?
Yeah, no, it's just navigating, like you guys said, it's, without my spouse, this would be basically an impossible task, especially being in ministry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nights where she has to be a single mom and it's pretty tough. And you guys know that you deal with that too.
Right.
But yeah, man, it's tough navigating that home life and ministry life. And also you see so many PKs, pastors' kids that just get burnt out on church, and they grow up seeing church as taking dad or taking mom away. And I'm terrified of that, like, bitterness developing in my kids, or that like resentment. So that's something I'm really cautious of. I actually don't tell them I'm going to church. I say daddy's going to work.
Oh yeah.
And I think Gabby's kind of figured that out, that church and work are synonymous.
Mhm.
But I still try to separate, like, hey, we're going to go to church today, from I'm going to work type. So I think there's still a difference there in her heart.
That's interesting, that topic though, because like for me growing up, as a preacher's kid myself, one of the things that I was different than my brother and sister. I wanted to be at the church.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I always wanted to be with my dad and be at the church, even if I wasn't talking to him. I just wanted to be there. But as my brother and sister, that was something that they struggled with. It was like dad was always gone. Dad was always gone.
Mhm.
And in our house now, my daughter, yeah, there's some times where it's like, well, daddy's over at church working, a lot. But if she's home, like for instance, with like quarantines and the snowvid or whatever you want to call it, Gracie Gracie likes to do her schoolwork where I'm at. And
Mhm.
so she spends a lot of time. And so I think, the obstacle that I am trying to overcome is, kind of similar to what you're saying, Gabe, where it's like I need to make that distinguishing factor, but in the same concept, where do you do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, where do you make the distinguishing factor that some of this is, work, and then it's ministry, but I'm also a dad at the same time,
Yeah.
because I don't want her to grow up and resent the church.
Right.
But in the same concept, I feel like part of the reason why I love what I do so much is because I did go to the church with my dad every day.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't. What do you guys think? I mean, like, what's I guess the question is, where's the line, and how do you
Well,
define that?
that's I'm not sure there is a line. It's a it's a give and take, I think.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wave, I guess. And I think it's especially difficult for you to even have a line there, because you live in the parking lot of the church you work for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I didn't really experience that when I was there, because Gabby was only like, what, 8 months old when we moved.
Right.
So it wasn't even a thing for me, really. But if she enjoys spending time with you there, I think that's going to help. As far, I mean, it's same thing for you. Like you said, you enjoyed it, so there's no resentment for you. So hopefully that's the same for her, but every kid's different.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, is that you can't treat every kid the same. They all have different
Right.
personalities, and
Well, that's
why,
like,
yeah.
Bo,
Right.
I'm sorry, Bo, you have two kids that are kind of age now that understands this, the factor in this. Like I have one, and Gabe, you have one that's at that age now, but
Sort of.
you've got two, Bo. So is there any resemblance, like, in the two of them? Is it one way, or is it another way, or how do you, because you guys are a little bit different in the fact that both of you are in ministry too, so
True.
this is two sides of the spectrum there.
Yeah. Well, and our whole world is different now than what it was a month ago.
Right.
And I'm home a lot now, or I can be. So I'm kind of the stay-at-home dad for right now, until I can find something else to do. But our kids are totally different from each other. But neither one of them has really showed any concern yet about being at the church too much or being away from us. But most of the time, I mean, one of us is always with them if they're not in school. So they're a lot of times one of us will stay home with the kids. Like, we're hardly ever both at the church together with the kids. But now that we're here, it's a little different. We have been there more now than we were in the past, simply because my whole life is upside down, and I don't have that full-time job holding me away all the time. So,
right.
But their school days are shorter now, and so that makes it complicated. So they do spend time at the church now, and they probably will get tired of it very quickly. But we don't plan on making that a habit. As far as, that's our plan,
Yeah.
But I feel like, everybody has to address this no matter what your job is.
Right.
So not necessarily at a church. I mean, people have to decide how much time they want to spend with their kids. It's not about where you're spending your time. It's about how you're spending your time and the relationship you have with your kids. If you're not spending time with your kids, then like just with them, like your relationship's going to be poor. But if you are spending that time with them, then your relationship's going to be good, and your kids aren't going to mind when you have to go to church or when you have to go do something at work. They know that they're going to have some more time with you in the future, and they're going to cherish that time, whether they really realize what they're doing or not. But my kids, they don't like me to have to go to work, but they also know that I'm going to come home and play with them later in the day or, at some point. It's just about making time and building that relationship, I think.
It definitely is about, making that time, because the issue, and I'm sure that you guys face this too, especially, well, I'm sure both of you do, but, or have, or however, but one of the things that I would say is probably the hardest is when I come home, it's easy for me to want to make an excuse like, oh, hey, I just need to sit down for a minute. I'm really, really tired. And then you sit down, and before you know it, your daughter has spent like an hour on her tablet or whatever, watching YouTube or whatever, and you're like, then you feel super guilty. And you should. I think you should. But that's the thing is we have to make that time. And like you said, Bo, it's not just people that are in ministry and distinguishing it with the church. I think too often society has gotten so used to, and this is kind of bumping off of our previous podcast, the first one, but like we spend so much time with technology that we're using it to a disadvantage, if you will. We're creating a nanny within a tablet or whatever, and it's like you lose so many moments that you could spend with your child, and you're not ever going to get that time back,
Right.
And that was something that was challenged to me from a pastor friend one time. He said, you're not always going to be a pastor, Josh. You're always going to be a dad. And that being said, work on your relationship with your family first, because it's utmost importance. I mean, obviously God is first, but you know what I mean? Like, over your career, over your ministry, you need to make sure that you take care of your family.
Yeah, I've got lots of notes here on that. Like, I say lots of notes. I've got some notes to make sure that we hit on that, because I believe that is the most important thing, is taking care of our family. And to do that, that means that we have to take care of our relationship with God. We have to take care of our relationship with our spouse, and then we have to take care of our relationship with our kids. And so those three things need to come before our relationship with our church. And
right,
that's hard. That's hard to keep in place. And a lot of people might even disagree with that, but I can't see it any other way in scripture. So I believe that if we don't have a healthy relationship with Christ, then all of our other relationships are going to suffer. And then if we can't have a healthy home life, then we're going to be suffering and then it's going to compound itself, because if you don't have a healthy home life, you probably aren't going to want to be at home. And so you're probably going to put yourself more and more into work, and then be less and less at home, and your home life will likely fall apart.
And if you put yourself more into work to avoid being home, you're going to start suffering in your work. Your work's going to go downhill because you're not going to find joy there. You're avoiding something else.
Sure.
And that's especially for us in like creative spots. When you're stressing or down on things, your creativity is just squashed.
Yeah. That kind of leads me to a question. I know, Bo, you said you got some things that you want to talk about, but I just want to be 100% transparent while we're here. Not that I haven't been, but I want to I want to be transparent. But like one of the things that I'm curious about is how can we help our listeners with the understanding of being an example to our children, and that means like being a good example as a father or a mother or whatever, whoever our listeners are right now, but being that example, like Bo said something about our relationship with Christ, being the example of that, being an example of a good, healthy marriage. I know that sounds like a duh question, but it's easier said than it is done. There's a lot of things where you spend so much time trying to get things right that it kind of overwhelms, if that makes sense. And so I guess the question I'm asking is, what do you two do to help be that example to your children? How are you being a good example of as a Christian, as a dad, and as a husband to your children? Like, you know what I mean about being a good example of what a husband should look like.
Are you speaking specifically just husband or just a person?
I guess you could. I was saying as a husband to kind of maybe help me out even, but I guess just overall, like as a parent, how towards a spouse, like that healthy relationship, or that relationship with you in Christ. How are you guys? What are some ways that we can help our listeners and even me? What are some things we can say that would help them? Like, let's just say somebody's listening right now and they say, you know what, this is a great topic because I have struggled for so many years and I'm at my wit's end. What would you say to that person?
Well, this isn't a complete answer, but I think it's part of the answer. I think there's a lot to be said for authenticity. And you talked about being transparent a minute ago. I think, and I can't speak for you guys, but I can speak for myself and for Anna. We grew up, and I think this is true for most of our parents' generation, and this is not attacking them or a knock on them. Just it was kind of a hide the issues, and when there were issues, we didn't really talk about them. We kind of swept them under the rug type thing.
Yeah.
If there were issues with us as children, we would talk about that, and discipline would take place. But as far as like if there was issues with them or if there's issues in their life, and I'm not saying you need to air out all your dirty laundry for your kids to see, but how can our children learn to deal with mistakes, to deal with issues, to deal with whatever, if we just sweep it under the rug or if we don't talk about it? Like, I know Anna dealt with this a lot. There would, be some kind of moment, a lot of tension in the family. Somebody would blow up on somebody, right. Really harsh discipline moment, and then never brought up again.
Right.
And it's like, let's go back to everything's fine. And I don't think that's authentic. And I think that's hurtful for your kids. And again, that's not the answer to the whole question, but that's part of what we need to do is be authentic.
I think authentic is a good answer. My spouse is very much in that aspect of, actions speak louder than words. So you could say it over and over and over again, Josh, but until I see it in action, right? And so like you said, the authenticity. Yeah. What about you, Bo? What do you think?
I mean, for me, I have to go with time. Like, if you want your relationship with your spouse to be better, you have to spend time with them. And it goes along with Gabe. It needs to be authentic time. It needs to be time, like intentional, and like time that you're not just sitting there in each other's presence. You're intentionally trying to get closer to each other. You want to do things each other enjoys. You want to, like you specifically want to do things for your spouse that they would enjoy or interest them.
And
sometimes that's not easy, especially when you're tired at the end of the day. You got to put energy into coming up with something to do, or actually doing whatever you've already thought of or planned. You won't always feel like doing it, but because you love your spouse, you want to do it for them, so you do.
Right.
And you got to be willing to be vulnerable. We got to learn to be vulnerable with our spouses and let them be vulnerable with us.
Right. Well, and I think that's something too, because that's on both sides of the spectrum. Gabe, you hit that. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask him to expand on that, like explain what you mean.
I think it's really easy for us to kind of recluse inside ourselves. Is that a word? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't really want to tell my wife my problems. I don't really want to tell her what I'm struggling with spiritually, especially.
Right.
And I should want to do that. I should want to be vulnerable with her, but I'm like, it's kind of either it's embarrassing or it's like, we've got enough problems to deal with. I don't need to put the, so it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your spouse, but also allowing her to be vulnerable with you. Cause there's times that, my wife will struggle with, anxiety or some kind of emotional turmoil. And part of me is just like, oh, okay, this again. But that's just because I'm dealing with my own thing and I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I'm not willing to be vulnerable with her. So it's difficult for me to allow her to be vulnerable with me. But that comes back to authenticity. Like, if we're just going to put on masks around each other and walk on eggshells and pretend like everything's honky dory, what's the point?
Right.
And then as far as like we've talked about, being our relationships being better with, being closer to Christ, spending more time. I told you guys, we had revival at church this week, and I'm going to go a little bit on a rabbit trail. Stay with me for a minute. But Dr. Stephen Manley, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's kind of a radical thinker in the Nazarene Church, but
yeah,
I had a good friend tell me about him today.
Yeah, dude, he's the dude that can preach for 50 minutes and you think it's been 7. Like he just has you from start to finish. But his whole, like, everything he talks about, it comes back to what he calls the merger, which is us. We admit that we're helpless because we're dependent. We're created to be dependent. We admit that we're helpless and that we can do no good without the Spirit of God coming and dwelling in us. And that's what all this really boils down to, is that good Gabe is God within me. Bad Gabe is me fighting against God within me, me trying to keep control over some aspect of my life. And our pastor, I really appreciate him doing this. He had Stephen Manley come into our staff meeting Monday and just share with us and discuss with us. And I was able to process with him. I was like, so I feel like I've had moments where I've like experienced the merger where I was capable of doing things that were beyond my own capability. Like, I did things that I could not do on my own. And I knew that was God. It's like, but there's also times that I know that I'm like struggling and I'm stressing and I'm trying to do something and I'm failing miserably. And so I was just trying to process with him, like, am I like in the merger, then out of the merger, or what's going on? He said, no, that is the Spirit of God revealing things to you in your life that you are still trying to control. And he's revealing things to you that you need to let go of. And I told him one of those things was my family. Like, I felt this need to have this grip on my family. Not that I'm like controlling them, but I'm trying to protect them from any, mentally, spiritually, physically. And I'm finally realizing that God within me saying, let me take part in this. Let me protect your family. Let me within you. It's not like us and God's over here. Sometimes we let him, it's God within us. And if we just give it all up to him and not fight that all these things improve. And it comes back to, so I'm tying this in now, how we treat our spouse and our kids. So he also talked about, like what you give your wife is what you're going to receive.
Yeah.
So like, if you come home from work, come home from church, come home from whatever, or you've watched the kids all day, like, Bo, you're stay-at-home dad now. There's probably frustrating moments. She comes home and, Nora was blah, 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 and Jonah was blah. You're probably going to get some, I had blah, blah, doofus at church did the blah, 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 because I'm guilty of that. I come home and be like, my stupid whatever did this, or she'll do that, and that's, you get what you give in those moments. And that comes all the way back to, is God speaking through me, or am I the things I want to control, the things I can't let go of and give to God, that I feel like I need to control.
That's an interesting thought, though, because one of the things is I would say that there's something about in my family and in my marriage and relationship. For some reason, mine's a little bit opposite in the fact it's that I come home kind of like what you were saying at the end, and it's like I have worked all week and all day trying to be as positive of a person as I can, that when I come home, there's like no positivity left. If I'm just being honest, and that's one of the things.
Yeah, I get that.
And so it's like, why do I do that? Because with my family, it's Gracie's the same way as Julie. It's like actions speak louder than words, and so it's like, man, I need to give more to them. It's kind of an aha moment is what I'm trying to say. What you said is kind of an aha moment to me. And I hope it is for listeners too. But that what you give to your spouse is what you'll give in return. I heard that somewhere, a preacher somewhere said it or something. Yeah. And then he said something like, you give your spouse this and she brings back this, and you give your spouse this, it is true. And I've noticed it. Like even in little small disputes, it's the same way with my kid. If I'm going to be, obnoxious and like, what are you doing? Then that's how she's going to respond back. But if I'm like, hey, let's not do that, she's going to respond gentle,
Well, and the same thing would play true in the vulnerability that Gabe was talking about. If you set the example first and kind of share some of the stuff that's going on inside you with your spouse, maybe they're more likely to open up the other way. So
and that vulnerability, and that's we're talking about being dads as part of this, and that's important for your kids as well. Like I said earlier, you don't air out all your dirty laundry. You don't sit your kid down and be like, yeah, your mom and I are struggling sexually. Like that's awkward. Don't do that. But there is something to be said for being vulnerable to your children struggling with something, or emotions are high or something, because I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you guys, but I grew up thinking my parents were pretty much superheroes, and that they were this person that I needed to strive to be. And then when I knew I was failing in my heart or in my mental state or something I'd done, I was afraid to approach them about that. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying that they should have told me all their dirty laundry. But I was afraid either of just, disappointing them, or perhaps just the discipline that could come from that. Right. And I think that's it comes back to vulnerability. I don't remember them being vulnerable with me. And maybe they were, but maybe not enough, right. But yeah, again, please hear this. Don't air all your dirty laundry. Don't go like bad mouth to your spouse, to your kids, or anything like that. Just let your kids.
Pastor Dad's told me to do it.
Yeah. It's okay for your kids to know that you're not a superhero, to know that you're not perfect.
Yeah.
And for them to know that they can tell you anything and that you're going to love them no matter what.
As you were talking there, I was kind of thinking that, we might remember some things that our parents could have done better, but we as children should not hold that against our parents, because we now recognize that we're not perfect. We don't know how to do it. They didn't know how to do it.
Right.
So, So,
and we don't even have teenagers yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's going to get really interesting. Yeah. I have much more respect for my parents, more and more every year.
Mm-hmm.
And also, not regret, but I don't know. I kind of feel bad for the kind of kid I was sometimes. Yeah. It's like, I see where that, I'm surprised they let me live, Like, is it in Psalm 46? And it's like, God, the heart of men, still you let them live. Like,
oh man.
I remember reading
that. You said you had some things on there that you had written down have we hit some of them or what?
Yeah, we've hit a lot of them. There were some other just little single topics offhand, just like
important point. You can hit your points, but you can't hit your kids.
Yes. Great point. Josh, you had mentioned something in preparation for this podcast about living in a glass bubble.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah, thanks for bringing that up because I forgot about that. So especially living in a parsonage. That's one of the things I have literally lived in a parsonage my whole life. I think with the exception of 1 year, I lived in an apartment. The whole glass bubble effect. I grew up in parsonages, but it's more than just the parsonage side of things. But the whole glass bubble of living, being in ministry, and your children and your family. One of the hardest things is the aspect of people expecting you and your children to live a certain way. When I was growing up as a preacher's kid, I literally rebelled as much as I possibly could because people would use that word. Well, your dad's a pastor. You should be doing better. You should know better. And that caused me to want to rebel. And I think that's a common misconception that we see so often, that it affects us in so many ways that we don't even realize it. Like, for instance, in my home life right now, it's like, there's even times where it's like, I'm not feeling at 100%. I don't want to go to church today because I don't want to look like I have to have it all together right now. You know what I mean? And it goes even further to the point of, okay, well, can I go to the altar to pray? Because I don't want people to think, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with my family. You know what I mean? And it's hard to be transparent sometimes. And I'm a very open person, but man, that glass bubble, it's like, did you hear what Pastor's son did? Or did you hear what Josh did? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like the glass bubble. Do you guys ever experience that?
I kind of look at it a little different on our world. Like I wasn't raised like I wasn't a pastor's kid. So Josh, you probably have a lot more experience with that. But as far as our current life, people are involved. Like, we share stuff with our congregation, and they ask us stuff, and so everybody in our congregation knows what's going on in our life to a point. I mean, we don't tell them every little detail, but I kind of look at it a little different, and it might not be exactly what you're talking about, but I kind of look at that as living as a community. We need to be aware of what's going on in each other's life, and that's hard. That it's not always comfortable because we live in a culture that does not really do that well. But I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
It's good to have that accountability or that just awareness so we can be there for each other. But I know it can get to a point where it's annoying and people are intrusive and they use the information they misuse the information and they might, share stuff that they shouldn't share and all that good stuff.
And that's where it kind of gets dicey. And you could argue that all of us grew up in a glass bubble because, Bo, we grew up in BB. Josh, you half grew up in BB.
Yeah.
BB is its own glass bubble, especially, if your parents work in the community at all, or like my parents worked at the school. So I had my own little bubble there. But I had a point here. So I think it comes back to that vulnerability, though. This isn't like talking at you, Josh, but I would be careful of, talking about looking like you have it all together. And I get what you're saying, because you got to have a certain attitude you need to walk into a service with, especially as a worship leader, because doesn't matter what's going on in my life, I've got to go up there and lead worship. But at the same time, our people can't expect us to be
robots.
Exactly. Yeah. We're every bit as human as they are. Now, we are called to a higher standard because of the nature of what we do, the nature of what we've been called to. But if you really read the scripture. We're all called that standard. We're just going to be judged a little more harshly if we lead people astray. That's really only the difference.
Mhm.
But all that to say, I know pastors who are literally killing themselves trying to wear this mask all the time because they think they have to uphold this certain image and hide things from people, no matter what's going on with their kids, no matter what's going on with their wife, no matter what's going on with themselves. And that's not a way to live. It's not a way to do ministry. First of all, it's definitely not a way to live.
Right.
And I think part of the reason, and I'm not trying to attack anybody here, but part of the reason they do that, I know one in particular, I think they've been burned. I think like both of you guys have mentioned, that information about their family, about them has been misused, been used as a tool against them. Because no matter where you go, no matter who you are, you're going to have people who are against you for just no reason. They just don't like you. It's whatever.
Right.
But I think especially some of our older pastors have been burned so bad by people they thought were their friends, people they thought they could trust. So now they've come up into their little tortoise shell, and they wear this pastor mask all the time, and they're killing themselves. Like I know a guy who is a lead pastor right now, who's been doing it for a long time. He just turned 50 last year. The dude looks like he could be in his 60s because he's just the emotional and mental stress that's put on him trying to uphold this image that he feels like he has to uphold, which is not totally his fault. I mean, like you guys said, there's people who will attack you within the information they have, and shame on them.
Right.
Like if you're just a churchgoer listening to this, give your pastor a break. And I honestly think the majority of you want to call them churchgoers, Christians, disciples, whoever, understand the humanity of their pastor. They understand that we're all in this together, but there's the loud few who are just going to try to tear you down no matter what. And that's unfortunate, but they exist. So it's a dilemma. It's a problem.
It is. And it goes to even the silliest things too, guys.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the parsonage side of the bubble. That was one thing I remember, and I'm not going to say any names, obviously, because this is a podcast and who knows where it's going to end up. But I remember this was before we lived here. There was a night, every Monday night, my family, my dad and mom wanted to spend time with us as a family and not be distracted by anybody or anything. Every Monday night, it was set aside. And I think that's healthy to set a certain time aside. And we would literally hunker down, turn all the lights off, and go to the basement to spend time together because of certain individuals that would come and literally knock on the door because it was a parsonage, and they just wanted to chit chat, and they just wanted to, and I refuse to believe that they couldn't find another time to do that. It's just, it's mind blowing. But that glass bubble in living in a parsonage, which parsonage life is kind of slowly fading. There's a lot of churches that don't have parsonages anymore. I'm thankful for my parsonage. I'm thankful because financially it just really, really helps. But that is one of the downsides. Anything that we do is seen. Anything that we don't do is seen. Does that make sense? Like, hey, I see there's trash in your yard still from last week. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you need to mow your yard. Oh, by the way, let's mow this area over here too. So you see what I'm saying? There's a glass bubble side, the glass bubble effect.
That's why I built a privacy fence at that parsonage.
Oh, that fence is a blessing. Gabe, for those that are listening, Gabe, he was at this ministry before me. And
after you, and then before you.
Yeah.
In between you.
But he built this fence, and I'll never forget. It's a privacy fence. When I first saw it, I was like, man, this guy is building a fence bigger than the Trump fence. It's like, it's huge. And I used to think, man, that's just crazy. But then I moved in and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever, because, I can literally hide myself and play with my daughter outside without having 16 people come up and talk to me. And I don't get me wrong. I love chatting with people from church, and I'm a very outgoing person, but sometimes I just want to spend time with my daughter.
And sometimes your daughter wants to go outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's kind of funny, that fence. I don't think I asked anybody if I could do it. I think I just did it. And I don't know why I did that. I wasn't really thinking. Your dad was like, "Hey, no problem. Just maybe in the future we should talk to the board about this." And I was like, "You're probably right. I'm sorry." Like, I think your dad and I talked about it, but we never like made a decision. And I was just like, "Yeah, I'll do it," because he was cool with it. But he was like, "We should probably ask the board first." I was like,
well, that's the other side
Next
of the glass,
time.
glass
"Next time,
bubble.
yeah, next Vince."
That's the other side of the glass bubble. I don't think any of you guys have ever experienced this, but and we don't now here. I mean, it's pretty much just whatever we want and need. But like, man, there has been some places in ministry that I've been in and that my dad has been in, and where we couldn't even paint the walls. Like,
Yeah,
do not do anything to this house
yeah,
without getting a board's approval.
which is crazy.
Oh my goodness. It's like, okay, you can even rent a house and do things that you want,
Mhm.
you know? So
Yeah, our landlord said we could do whatever we wanted in here pretty much.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Whatever color.
Well, they assume you're probably going to improve it, or if you don't, they'll just pay back over it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're making plenty of money off of you each month.
Yeah. They probably hire somebody to pay back over. They don't have to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So is that all we
Nope.
have to say about a glass bubble?
That's all I have for as far as the glass bubble goes.
Yeah.
All right. I wrote it down. Let's talk about how we plan, if we haven't already, because most of our kids are fairly young, but there's probably some things that we've dabbled in, like how do we plan to expose our kids to the world, to different things in the world?
And what's healthy about that?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. What's the approach? What's the reasoning? The justification?
you know, there's certain things that you just don't want to expose to them.
There's a lot of things I want to expose.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, that's the thing. I could see where we could go so many different trails on this. But recently, for those that are listening, my dad is not only just a pastor; he's in the captain in the police department and all that, and he's a detective. He's like a lead detective right now. And one of the things that recently happened was there was a girl abducted, and the reason she was abducted was she was chatting. A 14-year-old girl was chatting with men on a game. Well, that hit me pretty hard. She's fine, by the way. They got her and she's safe. But that hit me really hard because it's like, how do you expose your children to certain things, but not other things? Because to me, like, my daughter's 8 years old. And I remember, obviously, technology was way different when I was younger, if it was even there. But I didn't get a cell phone until I was 16 and driving.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter is 8 years old, and I gave her one of my old iPhones. Now, I refuse to allow her to, it's not on a plan. It's not, you know, it's literally just for games and monitor games, that is. And she can iMessage me, you know, but there is this one game called Among Us. And I was totally okay with it until this situation happened with this girl. That dad, you know, it didn't happen through Among Us. I don't remember what game it was, but like, it just kind of scared the mess out of me, you know? And it's like, I told my daughter immediately, I was like, you're not playing Among Us ever again. And I felt bad, but in the same concept, it's like, my daughter's 8. All right. So is that what you're talking about? Like, you know, expose certain things that we want to expose and not expose to our.
It could be anything. That's one aspect of it for sure.
Yeah.
I know my kids are into the Among Us too. And so it's really like, I really didn't want them playing it, but it's such a simple, basic little game. They had to go and put that chat aspect to it. And it's like,
why'd they have to do that? Because it's such a fun game without it, you know?
Yeah. They don't need it.
No.
They could do it without it.
Yeah, so that's one of the things, you know, for me and my family, and then also YouTube. My daughter, she loves to watch. I forget what it's called. It's like Spy something. I don't know. It's this married couple. They're really sweet, good people. I watched it for months with her until I let her just watch it by herself. But I would say that we are very healthy about it. We monitor everything that she watches and everything that she plays. Um, I think there's a certain point where we have to say no, that it's unhealthy. But in the same concept, there's also a point where we have to be like, it's unhealthy to not allow them to spread their wings a little bit too. Because you don't want to keep them so closed that they go to school and they hear something and they're like, what just happened? You know what I mean? Like, because that's going to happen. I mean, there's going to be things. And that's why, like, every day when I pick up my daughter from school, tell me about your day, and that's something I think it's important for all of us and everybody. We need to make sure and ask just curious questions, even if they get annoyed, they get older. I think it's important for us to be involved and present in our children's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. The whole how do you expose, when you expose, what do you expose? Gosh, there's a billion books on it. Everybody has their own opinion. This comes back to different personalities for different kids. I mean, every kid's different.
Yeah.
Every kid's gonna have different curiosities, different responses to different exposures. And it's terrifying to me. I don't even want to think about it.
Boils back down to spending time with your kids, and
it really does.
You know them, you know what they are attracted to or not, and you know what they need to know. But yeah, I finished a movie recently. I've started it a long time ago and never finished it, but I just finished it recently. It was like a Christian made film, but it was about a kid who basically grew up super sheltered and went to college, and like within just a couple months or so of going to school, he ended up getting a girl pregnant, and then had to figure out how to deal with that because he was not educated.
Right. You can be sheltered to a fault for sure. We see it all the time.
100%. Yeah. So what do you, is there a fine line, or is it just literally parent by parent, child by child? Because here's the thing. I know there were certain things that my parents allowed me to be exposed to that they did not allow my brother and sister to be exposed to. Now that may be third child syndrome. I don't know. But one of the things I know for sure is I was exposed to certain things because I wouldn't say it was like, hey, my parents were like, oh, well, we didn't let Jeremy and Stephanie do it, so we're just going to try it out. Let Josh screw up. I don't think it was like that. I think it was, hey, we've got 2 kids under our belt. Let's just, monitor this as we go. So there's not a one-time thing. I think people write books like Gabe said, but I think like you said, isn't it just child by child? Because like, Bo, with Nora and Jonah, like you may do one thing one way with Nora and then another with Jonah. How do you decide? How do you explain that to them too? Like Gabe, you have 2 kids you got 2 kids, and as they get older, you're going to deal with this too. So
yeah,
my personal philosophy right now, it's definitely, possible that this will change, but I believe that the earlier you can expose a child to something, the better they'll be. But you have to also take into
consideration
is the word I was looking for there. Not take into consideration how mature they're going to be with that information. So like they need to be aware of stuff, but they also need to know that they can't just go talking about it with everybody, because not all parents are going to want their kids knowing about stuff. So but they need to also be able to act responsible with that information. So so you got to take all that into consideration. You don't go tell your kids about every little thing, and then they, they're so young and immature that they go try it all just to see if you're right. You need to, you understand.
Yeah.
So I say that like my kids are not mature enough for many things yet. So
Yeah.
One is almost 10 years old. And she still needs a lot of work before there's, some of the major things to expose her to.
Gosh, I can't believe she's almost going to be like 10.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
You're creeping up on preteen, dude.
Yeah. Well,
Godspeed.
Yeah.
So in this, we're just talking about a few of the little cultural issues we have with our kids these days, but it could be anything movies and stuff are a big thing. And you struggle to know when to let your kids watch certain things or whatever. And
right.
That's a whole nother subject altogether, just watching movies in general. But there's the things in movies, it's what's in the movies that we're worried about exposing our kids to, and violence and gore and that kind of stuff, and language. For me growing up, those two things were things that I was exposed to kind of young.
Yeah.
Just outside of the movie world, not violence and gore so much as just I had a realistic view of it, because I don't know, it may not translate perfectly, but you grow up as a hunter, you know what a gun does. You witness what bullets do to animals, and you watch it on TV, that stuff's all fake. Most, what you see on there. And so you get to the really gory movies, and some of them are more accurate and shouldn't really be seen. But most of what's on TV is not very realistic anyways. Language stuff,
right.
I was exposed to that at a pretty young age. I mean, probably not as young as some kids, but just being around people who use language, and alcohol was, I was exposed to that at a young age, and I learned what it did to people, and I learned how people acted and what it was like for people that lived this way,
right.
Always, cussing like a sailor and drinking like a fish. That what the lifestyle looked like. I learned that, my personal experience was I didn't want my life to look like that. And so being exposed to that helped me.
Yeah, that's good.
Instead of being kept from it.
That's interesting though. Without getting too controversial, how do I say this?
Do it.
One of the things that scares me the most is the topic of homosexuality, because, I know it's coming. One day my daughter's going to see something like, well, why are those two girls holding hands? And so it's how do I expose that without exposing that? You know what I mean? But in the same concept, it's not just that. It's not just homosexuality. There's so many things that the world is worldly about. And it's, if I keep, like Bo said, if I keep it to myself and not explain it to her, somebody's going to teach her something. And I don't want it to be the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Rather she learns it at school or hears it from a friend, I'd rather her hear it from me and from God, the biblical way. And so exposing, now, obviously I'm not going to go to my daughter and be like, hey, this is what happened, but in the same concept, I think you're right, Bo. I think there's a early start to things that is healthy. Now we have to be mindful how we do that. Like you said, how are they going to respond? Are they responsible enough to respond a certain way? But I think that was that way for me growing up too. So I seen a lot of things and heard a lot of things, and that may trail a whole different topic. So if I get off track, stop me. But that was something that at home, my parents never talked about people at church, talked about people from church politics and church issues at home, at least around us kids, because my dad didn't want to ruin a relationship just because he had a bad day with somebody, you know. And I know I'm kind of changing subjects here, but that's a hard thing, you know, because it's like, when can you talk about it with your spouse, you know? Yeah, I'll stop there because that's a whole, you know.
Yeah.
Well, so going back to the, you know, knowing when to expose, how to expose, and who to expose to, and all that. Like Bo said, this all comes back to knowing your kids, knowing how they're going to handle it, knowing their maturity levels, knowing what they need to know, when they need to know it. And that comes back to spending time with them, and being authentic, letting them be vulnerable with you, and you being vulnerable with them to an appropriate degree. So,
yeah,
she could wrap up this whole episode. You could say what?
Well,
go ahead, Bo.
For that point, I want to also add that, like, when you choose to expose a kid to something, like, you don't just need like introduce them to something and say don't do it. Like,
right.
You need to make sure you explain the reasoning and your beliefs on it. The consequences of, you know, getting into something that you shouldn't, or, you know, whatever.
And it's that way with my daughter, because she's very curious. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but my daughter is a very curious person. She has to know an answer, and it's not disrespectful in her heart. She's really trying to process, like she processes everything. And so, like, if I say don't do something, she really wants to know why. It's not, well, why? You know, it's, well, why? What's going to happen if I don't, you know, or what's going to happen if I do that? So yeah, Bo, I think that's right. I think explaining why is an important factor. And I think that if we don't do that, then we're not parenting right, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. How many times did you hear, because I said so?
Oh man.
Well,
I catch myself doing that. I'm like, no, I got to start telling her why.
Well, kind of an extreme example for me at the time, it's been I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe. I can't remember. It was somewhere around then, a year and a half, maybe. Nora was doing something and she was lying to us about something, and we couldn't get her to quit. Like, she was doing it a lot, and like, it might be cheesy, it might have went too far, but I did it. I said, you know where you go if you make a habit of lying. You could end up in prison or something. And I was like, and just to show you what that looks like, I took her in the truck and we drove down to the county jail. And Woo! The one there it looks like a prison. It's big, and, you know, wow. We drove. I was like, you want to live there all your life? but yeah,
that's a bold strategy, Cotton.
But she kind of straightened up.
I like it. No, that's good. But they do need to see that, though. Like, sometimes, just hearing consequences sometimes isn't enough. They need to visualize, or sometimes they need to deal with it. You know, like me going to college, first year out of high school, and not caring enough to make my grades and go to class, and then getting out in the real world and realizing I don't want to do stuff that, you know, I don't want to work. I don't work manual labor my whole life. I had to learn the hard way, and I needed to be shown that. Even as an 18, 19-year-old, I still wasn't. I got told that all the time. You don't want to do this. I was like, I don't care.
Took me 20 years to figure that one out.
Yeah, you know, I think that there's an unhealthy side of not exposing certain things too, because, man, I try to tell this, especially as a youth pastor, I try to tell this to parents all the time. If you shelter your child so much, when they do go to college or when they do get out on their own, they're going to, like it or not, the statistics prove they're going to go crazy. You know, it over and over and over. And I hate that because I don't want to say your child's another statistic, because that's not the way to look at it. But in the same concept, it's like, dude, hear me out. If they're going to hear it from somebody else, they're going to see it from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Do it now and do it the right way, instead of waiting until they just get all this freedom all of a sudden and go off the deep end. Mm-hmm. And then you're wondering, what did I do wrong? Well, I'm sorry, but you didn't, you kept them away from the world so much that it was unhealthy, you know? Mm-hmm. So
also, this is very important. Give them permission to screw up. I'm not talking about like, yeah, go ahead and get knocked up. That's fine. I'm not saying that, but give them permission. Like, don't make it so difficult for them to learn from their own mistakes, because we're, you know, and I don't really know how to unpack that, but
let me say this. Can I say this on that? One of the things
I don't know yet.
My dad,
can you?
My dad was always really good about this for me. My dad, that was something growing up that he let me learn from mistakes. Matter of fact, that's how we even discuss things. Like, if I could prove my dad wrong, he'd say, okay. But if I was wrong, I was grounded. You know what I mean? Like, but that was one of the things I did learn from that perspective of, you know, let me mess up and I'm going to help you when you do mess up. Mm-hmm. I told you so, son, but it's okay. Let me help you. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the way it was for me growing up. I'm thankful. And I think so often we're too afraid to let our children mess up because we don't want to see them hurt. But in the long run, it's going to hurt worse if we don't.
Yeah. That comes down to, like, you know, Copeland is 10 months old. And I remember when Gabby was getting ready to crawl and walk, you know, the parent, every time your child stumbles and falls, bumps their head, stubs their toe, if you jump to save them or jump to be like, no, it's okay.
Right.
That child's going to be a crybaby the rest of their lives. And I've seen some of those crybabies, and those kids are annoying. But see, Gabby is a tough kid because, well, I don't know. Part of it's just her personality, but she's a tough kid because she'd fall down and we go, uh-oh, ha ha. We'd laugh with her and she would laugh. But and just to prove my theory, one time I just wanted to try and be like, okay, let's see if I'm like, oh no, it's like the exact same type of falling down. And it's,
yeah,
you know, like, and that's a silly example, but that it starts there. Like, are you going to let your kid walk? Your kid can't walk if you don't let them try, and they're going to fall and they're going to hurt themselves a little. I mean, not really injure themselves, but they're going to get bumps and scrapes. But that's true for the rest of their lives. If you don't let them get bumps and scrapes, they're never going to learn anything.
My kid fell out of the second story window the other day out of this house, and
wow,
she got up and walked away and laughed.
Wow.
She or he, Jonah or Nora?
Nora.
Listen, Nora's a tough
fell
girl.
Out of the second story window. That's another level. That's impressive.
Yeah, I don't know how she did it, but she did it.
I
think she was scared for a little bit, like she might have hurt something, like she wasn't sure, but she wasn't hurt. She didn't cry about it.
I have watched that girl though, Gabe. Bo, she is like the extreme. Like, she does, like,
she's pretty nuts.
When they had snow, I watched her snowboard on a video, and I'm thinking it was like nothing to her. She just going, and that hill that you used to live.
Don't even think about it.
Yeah, no. And that was the thing. Bo used to live, to those, everybody listening, Bo used to live in a place where there's this really, really steep hill at a parking lot at like a school or something. And his daughter, Nora, she got a skateboard for her birthday, and like literally no hesitation whatsoever, jumped on the skateboard and just rolled down the hill. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen such fearlessness in a child that age.
Yeah, she knows what it does when she falls. It just doesn't hurt her. Like, she falls all the time. She gets up and goes again.
She's going to be the new star of KOS.
I heard that.
Raising them right, baby.
But Jonah's a different story. He's total opposite.
Yeah.
I treat them both the same. I don't baby them, but Mama does a little.
But that comes down to kids' personality. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. It. They're all different.
Yeah, I can tell when they're hurt and when they're not. So
yeah. When they're faking it, but you can't just be like, you're faking it.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I say, you're not hurt. You're fine. Stop.
Well, I'll say that to Gabby. Yeah, I'll tell her.
It's not even red.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen. All right, everybody. That does it for us this week on Pastor Dad's podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, watching, and or listening. Be sure and like and subscribe either on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. We're all over the place. So wherever you find us and want to watch us or listen to us, please like, subscribe, and share if you can. That'd be great. We just want to continue to grow. And also, thank you so much for joining us today. And one last thing, be sure and head over to Facebook, Pastor Dad's Podcast, the group on Facebook, and give us a post or a message. Give us a topic you'd like us to discuss, and we will most likely do that. And if you don't have a topic to give us, just comment on one of our posts or messages about any questions you have or comments you have about a previous episode or anything. We'd love to just have a discussion with you. So whatever you want to do there, please just engage with us. We'd love to engage with you, to encounter conversation so we can all grow together. Is that right, guys?
Yes.
That's right. Awesome. All right. So once again, thank you so much. This is Gabriel, Josh, and Bo signing off from Pastor Dad's. Have a great week, everybody.